Good evening, friends. How are you? Let's talk about things which nobody wants to talk about online. Yes, we're going to talk about the untold truth. Muslim world, Muslim world has grudges against the West. The Muslims in Muslim lands, living in Muslim countries, many of them, I would say a vast majority of them, hold grudges against the West. That's the fact. That's the reality. That doesn't mean that they will not be hospitable to you. They will not be well behaved towards you. And they all want to, take down West. That's not it. But they have grudges. Many of them have grudges. Many of them are angry with the West. Why are they angry? Do they have valid reasons to be angry? Is it all to do with foreign policy? Are there conspiracies against the Muslim world? Or are there conspiracies against the poor countries? Or is the West very selfish? When it comes to foreign policies, I would say, of course, there are flaws in the foreign policies in many of the Western countries. And the foreign policies, they need to be revised. But that doesn't mean that that would justify terrorism against the West. You will see that all the monetary organizations, for example, the International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organizations, all these, or even the United Nations, all these organizations are more or less controlled by the US and the Western powers. So it doesn't matter how much you say that all these countries are working towards human rights, which is valid to so, yet the people in the poor countries will always blame the West for their policies. World Trade Organization and say International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, these are all dominated by America and the Western countries especially. Why? Well, for many reasons. For reasons which might otherwise compromise the dominance of those countries. There was an initiative by Muammar Gaddafi to opt for gold as a media of currency, and that in fact angered many of the Western countries, especially America. And there was also many steps which Gaddafi took which angered Britain validly so. But Gaddafi was also a dictator, but Gaddafi used Islam as a sort of a unique form of Islam to have a strong grip on his own people. Let me get rid of Fred. Give me a sec. Sorry. Apologies. And there are also many Islamic scholars who think that we should have more reliance on dollar as a form of currency. Iran and Qatar, they rely more on Chinese currency than on dollar to do their trade. Right. Now, as far as the foreign policies are concerned, are there reasons for the Muslim countries to be angry? There are many countries in the world which will agree that the Western countries are being, especially the US, which prompts many of the international conventions or treaties where they are not party to. For example, when it comes to global warming, America would initiate many of the talks, but still they will not comply with Kyoto Protocol or the protocol that was taken up in regarding to this in Greece, or they will not comply with many of the issues which in relation to concern to global warming. Why is that? For example, India would not be willing, or China will not be willing to comply with global warming warnings, because they believe that this global warming is all a fuss, and they will say these are all in fact in the way to progress. So to progress, you need to sort of burn energy, and which may cause global warming. Bangladesh is going to have nuclear power soon, because that's the initiative. I think that's what the Bangladesh government is thinking, that there will be that nuclear energy will be used for in the energy sector only. But there's a race, and the Western countries are viewed as a sort of impediment in many ways towards developing those countries. UK, my country, donates a lot to US, to Pakistan, millions of dollars, to India even, millions of dollars, even to Bangladesh, millions of dollars. I saw a bridge, a great, fantastic bridge that is used when, you know, in Bangladesh you go from Dhaka to another district called Sylhet, which was totally funded by the British government. So there, in the development of infrastructure, Western countries are donating a lot, whereas Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest donors to Bangladesh, but Saudi Arabia donates hugely in areas like building madrasas, schools, or giving charity works. But in the development of infrastructure, Saudi Arabia doesn't donate much. But still, the overwhelming majority of Bangladeshis would love Saudi Arabia. They will kind of shun away from the fact that Saudi Arabia violates human rights. And on the other hand, although many of the, I would say, vast majority of the Muslims, they're definitely Islamic scholars, imams, they do not like the West, and they, in fact, many of them consider America, Britain as enemy countries. But they will still would love many of the things the Western countries offer. For example, human rights and all, and they will queue up to get visas. But they will also want those countries to be either to become poorer and to lose dominance in the world eventually. Many of the migrants live in the West, but they will keep on sending money to their homelands, but they will home countries where they come from, but they will not be donating to charity organizations here. Many of them will try to justify saying that these charity organizations are being run by Christian groups, and many of the Christian groups are probably operating in those countries in the camouflage of business. Let me put some more lights into this. I think there is more light. So that there are grudges, and you know that the G8 countries are not viewed with much respect by the developing countries. So these grudges are not from Muslim countries only. These grudges come from poorer countries or third world developing countries as a whole. Now, democracy, in reality, does it work in poor countries? We talk about democracy, we talk about individual freedom, we talk about public rights, we talk about, separating church and state, or separating mosque and state. We talk about all that. But does it really work? If you remember the 1970s, you will remember, soon after the time of the first oil embargo initiated by Saudi Arabia in relation to Palestinian issue. If you remember that, you will know that after the first oil embargo, And after the Iranian Revolution and Russia or Soviet Union then invading Afghanistan, you can still go on YouTube, and if you write President Jimmy Carter's address to the nation after Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, you will see, if you listen to the words he uttered carefully, you will see President Jimmy Carter said, he identified Soviet Union as a big atheist country. He used the word atheist. And when it comes to Afghanistan, he kind of suggests as a God-fearing country and small country. So religion was a pivotal issue in his address to the Americans. And the funding of the Mujahideen, we know all that. Even Osama bin Laden was praised in British newspapers at that time. And then Bangladesh was a new country. Bangladesh had its independence in 1971, so end of 71. Then Bangladesh had a secularist government under the founding father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was in fact a socialist and a secularist. But also he was not someone who would just be friends with the West, because during the 1971 Liberation War, Pakistan was West Pakistan and Bangladesh was East Pakistan. And during that war, which was one of the bloodiest wars in human history, where 3 million Bangladeshis were killed by West Pakistanis, and many of the Islamists, jihadis, under the banner of Jamaat Islam and other groups, carried out genocide in Bangladesh. And still, the Western countries, especially America, Britain, especially America, was supporting Pakistan until the British Indian journalist Anthony Mascarenhas brought it out in a Guardian newspaper, and the world kind of woke up to the fact that genocide was being carried out in Bangladesh. So West Pakistan was trying to keep its grip, its dictatorial, despotic grip on East Pakistan, and now Bangladesh. And Western powers were supporting that because there was a vested interest to keep India and the Soviet Union under check, because India and Soviet Union were kind of bed partners in international politics at that time. And Bangladesh liberation soldiers were being trained by India, and on some occasions by the KGB. And we can also listen to interviews by the then KGB spies. Even now on YouTube, we will see there are many videos up there. So you see, the issue of religion was rather taken as a positive thing. Islam was taken as a positive thing at that time to put the atheist Soviet Union and its allies into corner. After the Liberation War, Bangladesh was not seen favorably by the Muslim nations, and Saudi Arabia didn't recognize Bangladesh for a long time. For a good few years, Saudi Arabia didn't recognize Bangladesh until the founding father of the country was in power. And there are interviews where American journalists asked the founding father during the Great Famine in Bangladesh, soon after the Liberation War, 1973-74, where hundreds and thousands of people starved to death, and Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries were not coming up with help because Bangladesh was being viewed as a betraying nation to the Muslim Ummah. Then the founding father was asked by American journalists whether he was prepared to accept donations or financial support or relief from the US. And the founding father said he didn't reject any kind of help from America, but that should be with no caveat or no precondition attached to that. What did he mean by that? That he meant by that he will not be bowing to any kind of religious or probably some kind of pro-Pakistani or totally anti-Soviet or anti-Indian stance, if that was the case, because at that time India was, as I said, kind of bed partners with Soviet Union during 1971, Bangladesh Liberation War. So after the founding father was killed, Mr. Ziaur Rahman, or Major Zia, came to power in Bangladesh under chief martial law, as a chief martial law administrator. Later on, he became the president of the country, and American newspapers always saying that he had always this aspiration, political aspiration. So after he came to power, Ziaur Rahman of Bangladesh, he tried to rebuild the relationship with the Muslim nations, and he was accepted with the open arms. There were border skirmishes between Bangladesh army and the Indian army, because Ziaur Rahman was already warned. The founding father was already warned about Ziaur Rahman's aspirations by the Indian secret service agencies long before the founding father's death, that he should not be the head of the armed forces, and although he was the senior most, he was not made the head of the armed forces by the founding father, which probably was the eventual cause of his assassination, because his assassination plan or plot was known to Ziaur Rahman, because he was killed, the founding father was killed in a coup by the army officers. And after he came to power, Ziaur Rahman, he brought back the exiled, I would say not exiled, the Islamists who ran to different countries, various countries. Many of them fled to Britain, my country. Many of them came to Britain. Many of their children, those Islamists, their children even living here with British passports now. And many of them who in fact engaged in genocide are still here. One of them is, I told you many times, Chaudhry Manuddin, who was the main godfather behind Islamic Forum of Youth, Muslim Council of Britain, another organization. He was even a spiritual director of the NHS, who also spearheaded the anti-Salman Rushdie campaign around the world, which started from here in Britain. So this pro-Islamic policy of the Western countries, in fact, offered refuge to many of the Islamists who are now causing trouble in the West. So when Ziaur Rahman, as I was saying, came to power, especially after 1978, he invited back many of those Islamists, including Professor Ghulam Azam, who was the main man in the Jamaat Islami. Jamaat Islami is the organization, is the political organization, which is the biggest political organization, having wings in India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and they are in cahoot with Muslim Brotherhood, and they are highly patronized by Saudi Arabia, which was the brainchild of Maulana Maududi, who was also the man behind Medina University, etc. So Ziaur Rahman welcomed him back. Ziaur Rahman was talking about Islam in the pretext of multi-political party democracy. He in fact invited Islamists to initiate politics in Bangladesh. On the other hand, in West Pakistan, then it was Pakistan, saw Ziaul Haq the same first name, Zia. But this is in Bangladesh, Zia Rahman. In Pakistan, Ziaul Haq came to power. Ziaul Haq, became was great friends with, as always, Pakistan was with America, and Ziaur Rahman of Bangladesh also rebuilt the relationship with America. He was welcomed by Jimmy Carter and walked the White House lawn with him. You can see, you can just Google the picture. Ziaur Rahman walks with Jimmy Carter, and this friendship developed. 2 years in two nations, and Jamaat Islam Pakistan for the first time also held cabinet in Ziaul Haq's ministry. Ziaul Haq also was a dictator, a military man who came to power. So Ziaul Haq and Ziaur Rahman, both military men, both Zias, both Islamist agendas, both Jamaat Islam agendas, both patronized by the Western powers. They became powerful. And eventually, both of them were assassinated. Both of them. One died in a plane crash, and many of the politicians and political analysts think that he was probably killed. It was not just an ordinary plane crash or helicopter crash. It was a planned assassination, whereas Ziaur Rahman was assassinated by other army officers. And one of the army officers who was the main man behind Ziaur Rahman's death, Major Manzoor, his wife, his family in fact lives in America now. You see where I'm coming from. So these are all happening. If you have to know international politics and politics of the Muslim world very well to understand how it works. And if you read the book Confessions of a British Spy, you will see how Wahhabism and espionage also worked together hand in hand, and how Aramco, the American Arab oil company in 1930s, came to being and all. So Muslims, I'm telling you from the Muslim point of view, how they think this, why do they kind of hate the West, and how we can diffuse this tension. Unless we talk openly about it, we cannot diffuse the tension. After Aramco agreement between America and Saudi Arabia, the Saud family fell out with the Islamist Orthodox groups, who in fact were working together with the Saud family to get a hold of the Arabian Peninsula and help drive out the Ottoman out of the Arabian Peninsula, the Turks out of Arabian Peninsula. And you should know the story of the British man who was there at that time, the Lawrence of Arabia, probably you should know. So the Turks and the Saudis always had problems since then. Even today, they do not like one another that much. Although those are two Sunni states, but after the Ottoman, the founding father of modern-day Turkey, Kemal Atatürk, was not only secularist, but also many of the Muslims believe him to be believe that he was an atheist or an apostate even, because he, in fact, started the practice of asking Turks to have pork and asked them to dress in the Western style and give up their traditional dressing. On the other hand, you will see, coming back to the 1970s, the premises of the Islamist rise there. You will see there's a photo where President Jimmy Carter, again, having a toast of champagne with the Shah of Saudi Arabia during New Year. So which shocked the Iranians as a whole, because they still, end of the day, it was a Muslim nation, so they couldn't accept that. So Islam was kind of played with after there was no such way to kind of diffuse it with secularist approach like that of Shah of Iran. And surprisingly, America was one of the first nations which recognized the Islamist Republic of Iran. Quite shocking. In the 1950s, there was also a kind of a revolution, Iranian revolution. Most probably it was 1954, if I recall, which was also orchestrated by the CIA. Now, this sense of Islam being used is in the minds of the Muslim psyche. And now there are many theories, many suggestions, even from the political arena of US, who believe that CIA was behind the creation of the Islamic State. But the question is, my position is, it doesn't really matter whether America built or other countries were behind the birth of Islamic State, or the Mujahideen who fought against the Soviets turned to became Taliban or joined up Islamic State later on. The question is, why should Muslims join up with Islamic State? Why should they go and find it appealing to join Islamic State or other extremist groups? Why? That's the main thing. You know, like you and I, we are adults, and if somebody just leaves a flashy, shiny, blade or a knife on the table, we'll not be stabbing one another because we are adults. We are not children that will be playing with a knife and we will end up cutting one another. So why should Muslims be enticed by this evil thing, Islamic State or jihadi movement around the world, simply because allegedly some Western power created it? Why? Why should you do that? And if any Western power created that, that is obviously immoral. And immoral things do take place when it comes to international politics. And this is an open secret. It happens. But my question is, why should you use it? Well, you can say Muslims overwhelmingly, they act like children because they're not educated. Illiteracy is high among Muslims. But it's not only that. The main thing, through my research, I found out that Islam was wearing a mask, a mask of beauty, you can say, or if you say a mask of lies for 1400 years, and that mask was simply taken off, and the ugly face of Islam. So now once we have seen someone like the ugly political fascist Arabic fascist movement and face of Islam, now it doesn't matter how much you try to, I will never be able to become a hypocrite again and convince myself that this is not Islam, that mask is Islam. I will never be able to do that. That is done. So that's how I woke up. The politics, the conflict of international political lies, the hypocrisy woke me up as well. And I know the international politics well, and now I also know the domestic politics, how it works, and how the understanding of many, not only Muslims but mainstream people. So what is the way forward? Should we try to put the mask back on, like apologetic Islamic scholars or Islamists or Muslims try to put a false mask back on the ugly face of Islam and say that is Islam? That's not going to work. Unfortunately, that damage is done because the tafsirs or interpretations of the Quran and Hadiths, in fact, drifted away from the core teachings of Islam. and try to give it a more apologetic understanding. For example, many of these Islamic schools, like the most rational Islamic school, Hanafi school, which is dominant in South Asia, biggest Sunni school, it believes on more rationality. But now that has opted, the Muslims of South Asia are opting more towards Salafi or the Wahhabi or the Puritan, because that is more appealing. Because why is it appealing? Because it encourages you to grab power, and young people get enticed with this sense of holding power, getting power, and sharing power. Youth is dragged by that, because a simple lie is easily sold but it's a complex truth. Unless you become a bit older and wiser, complex truth is difficult to be sold. So youth get usually dragged by it, and some vested older generations, Islamic scholars, reap benefit out of it. That has been going on through the ages in the Muslim world. So now the only way forward would be to get the youth out of it, and the Western powers and Western media they have a huge responsibility towards this. They have a huge responsibility to make sure that that the Western media have a huge responsibility that the truth is told. Now, if they want to keep the mainstream or Western people or the Muslims uninformed about it and allow hypocrisies and lies to be spread about Islam, it's never going to work, because we are living in the 21st century, where you have information highway, we have internet, we have people like me who know it, who have already spoken about it. So I think this is not the time anymore that we can say we can be hypocrite and we can just hide things about it. We can't do that anymore. Now, ex-Muslims who especially lived in the East and are living in, they have a huge responsibility. They need to engage in politics more and more. The more they engage in Western politics, the more they will be able to get the people informed that how we have seen the transition. Someone like me who is 51 years old, I have seen the transition, how Islam, from apologetic Islam became more realist, Puritan Islam, how the society is changed, how the truth was unmasked. So we will be able to help. That's why I have joined for Britain. You have a responsibility to back me up and join us, join our party. Especially, I will call upon those of you who are living ex-Muslim. If you are living in ex-Muslim, if you're an ex-Muslim, and sorry, I'm being disturbed by a call. If you're an ex-Muslim, you must join hands. And not only if you're an ex-Muslim, if you are concerned about what I'm saying, and if you want the untold truth to be told, you should join Forbidden Party, because we are not a racist party, we are not a far-right party. Enough is enough, and we should be holding hands one another. And if you are living in Northern Ireland, you should get in touch with me. You know my phone number, you know my email address. Get in touch with me, and let's take this movement forward, because the best way to make changes is to enter politics. That's the way forward, I think, because there are many things we cannot otherwise tell the world. Thank you for listening.